This is episode 9 of Entrepreneurs for a Change. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to our mailing list at entrepreneursforachange.com. Are you ready to be the change? If so, you've come to the right place. You're about to join a movement of entrepreneurs who are empowering people, saving the planet, and turning their passion into profits while creating the lifestyle of their dreams. If you don't believe us, check out our website at entrepreneursforachange.com, a place where you can be inspired, mentored, and supported by a tribe of change-making entrepreneurs just like you. Happy New Year's from the beautiful island of Koh Tao, Thailand. This is Lorna Li, your host for another episode of Entrepreneurs for a Change, where today we'll be talking to Tyler Gage, co-founder of Runa, a beverage company that produces energy drinks and tea made from Amazon Guayusa, which is cultivated by indigenous communities in Ecuador. Now, Tyler and I have a little bit of history. Years ago, I introduced him to a family of shamans from Ecuador, the Mamayactas. Tyler graciously allowed us to host a ritual in his home. During ceremony, the Mamayactas served Guayusa tea to the participants, which was Tyler's first introduction to the tea, an experience that sparked a company. Traditionally, indigenous Quechua families in Ecuador wake up at dawn and gather around a communal fire to drink gourds of Guayusa. During this time, village elders teach the youth about ancestral myths, hunting techniques, social values, and about what it means to be Runa, meaning fully alive or fully living human being in the indigenous cosmovision. I've been impressed by the growth of Runa, which started as a business idea while Tyler was in college. But what I'm most impressed by is Tyler's commitment to sustainability and preserving indigenous traditions. I am most excited by his recent venture, Rios Nete, which is a healing and research center in Peru dedicated to the practice and preservation of indigenous Amazonian medicine, set to open in the beginning of 2015. It will be the first institution dedicated to practicing and methodically researching Amazonian medicine. In addition to receiving patients who seek to treat illnesses through traditional means, Rios Nete intends to catalog, preserve, and scientifically validate the components of this medicinal approach in order to protect both the plants and the knowledge of their medical uses from extinction. To check out this amazing initiative, go to riosnete.org. That's RIOSNETE.org. Or check out the link in our show notes at entrepreneursforachange.com/9. Tyler Gage is the president and co-founder of Runa Amazon Guayusa Tea Company, a social enterprise that exports sustainably harvested Guayusa tea sourced from indigenous communities in Ecuador. Tyler has spent the last 5 years working with indigenous communities in the Amazon, developing fair trade initiatives with generous funding from business plan competition prize money, angel and VC investors, USAID, the government of Ecuador, and many other organizations. In this interview, Tyler will explain the process of founding a social enterprise in a developing country. He'll share with us what it took to set up a tea export supply chain in Ecuador, funding sources you've never heard of that are available to social entrepreneurs in developing countries, what it takes to get funding from USAID, and how to make your startup attractive to angel and VC investors. Now, before diving into the interview, I want to encourage you to rate, review, and download Entrepreneurs for a Change on iTunes. This really helps us reach more people with inspiring stories of entrepreneurs who are changing the world. Also, if these stories inspire you to start a world-changing business of your own, head over to our website at entrepreneursforachange.com and download the Business Changemakers Toolkit to get a jumpstart today. Now on to the show. So Tyler, I have known you for quite some time, and I've been really enjoying watching the growth of your business, Runa, from the sidelines, from sharing our mutual interest in the culture of the Amazon to discovering your initial business idea of importing Guayusa from Ecuador and then visiting your company down in Ecuador in Archidona. I'm just so impressed by the amount of growth that I've seen over the past couple years and what you guys have accomplished. So I'd love for you to tell us more about Runa, particularly what is Guayusa, what sparked the initial business idea that became this triple bottom line, sustainable, fair trade social enterprise, and, all the fun stuff too, like what it took to research your market, supply chain, build your team, and get your product ready for export to Western markets.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lorna, for the opportunity to share and connect with you and your audience. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. That was a nice string of introductory questions, so I can, do my best to fill in about Runa and the Guayusa tea. So I guess ever since, I'm a young guy myself, but ever since my freshman year in college, I was really fascinated by the Amazon. I grew up in the suburbs in California and never really felt connected to any traditions or spirituality or really any kind of cultural heritage. So when I was first invited by an ethnobotanist to help him do research in South America, I really jumped at the opportunity, sort of feeling that yearning to connect with something a bit deeper and more ancient. So from there, I spent a couple years doing primarily linguistic research. I was really fascinated by the native languages and particularly how the languages reflect the native community's environmental values. So actually language is their way of mediating their relationship between the environment, which is a big part of their identity in turn. Then I had a lot of experiences where I spend all night in ceremonies that were incredible with music and myths, but at first thing in the morning at sunrise I'd hear chainsaws cutting down hardwood trees. So the families could get a couple dollars to send their kids to school or just buy rice or yucca just to feed their families. And really saw that challenge that they face where on one level they want to maintain their traditions, cutting down trees, it hurts them in a way. But when it's their child versus a tree, it's a pretty easy decision to make. And they really don't have any sustainable economic opportunities. They can move to oil fields, they can log trees, they can grow monocrops, but nothing that really is sustainable environmentally or consistent with their cultural values. And then one morning I tried Guayusa tea. I was in Ecuador, and the families there, they get up right at dawn, they boil these big clay pots full of these Guayusa leaves to make this tea that they dip the gourds into and drink from the gourds and tell stories and talk around the fire until sunrise. And drinking the stuff gave me a pretty good boost of energy. The indigenous people tout it for its energizing and nutritional effects. We've later learned that it actually has more caffeine than any plant in the world and double the antioxidants of a green tea to sort of reflect all the ancestral uses. And a really nice flavor. I was really amazed at how clean and smooth the tea was compared to other teas I drank. So it kind of stayed in the back of my head as something that I loved and had recognized at that point that no one had ever commercially produced it. So I went back to school to finish my studies and took an entrepreneurship class during my last semester with a couple of my best friends. We were shooting around ideas for business plan ideas and concepts, and I threw out the idea of creating a beverage company to import this, kind of crazy, unknown Amazonian tea. So for whatever reason, we thought that was a marvelous idea and got to researching what actually making a tea company and a beverage company would look like in the U.S. And from there, we realized it was actually a pretty good opportunity. We realized that, in general, energy drinks are the fastest growing beverage category, beyond anything Coke, Pepsi, beer, whatever it is. And second is tea. So there's a lot of, obviously, consumer need in the modern day for energy, and also the awareness of tea's health benefits and the simplicity and taking some time. So we saw some opportunity to sort of merge those two categories in the beverage world. Then we actually ended up winning Brown's business plan competition and the Rhode Island State business plan competition, and subsequently graduated December of 2008. So with that, my business partner Dan had a job offer, and I was thankful to receive to go back down and keep doing my research. We decided that not only was this a really cool challenge that was before us, thankfully we had some resources, but also it was really the kind of work we wanted to do. For me, I think research is fascinating, and it's great to document and share about the indigenous traditions on a more conceptual level, but really building markets that, one, create real impact for the families. To date, we've generated about almost $80,000 of income for these farmers in a pretty short period of time, and seeing the impact that makes on their ability to sustain their families and feed their kids is huge. And secondly, up here in the north, when we can share our tea with thousands of people and say, hey, this is something that the indigenous people drink every morning, it has immense cultural significance and also a lot of potential health benefits and energy for you, how real and tactile and physical that exchange is. And it's almost much more meaningful because there's something physical to share. It was just really caught our heart and our mind as something we wanted to create.
So you gave up a Fulbright fellowship to start your social enterprise.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people thought that was a terribly smart decision, my parents included.
But hey, look where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, we're growing. Things are moving well for now.
I think you've actually been able to create a lot more positive impact starting a social enterprise that actually provides meaningful employment to a sector of people that in Ecuador are probably the most marginalized people in that population. So the positive impact of starting your company was actually probably a lot bigger than, the research, the impact through doing research with your Fulbright fellowship.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. At this point, we're well on track. Our plan in about 5 years is to be generating about $500,000 a year in direct income for the farmers. That's straight money in their pockets for a few thousand families. And that really is kind of reaching the truly transformative level that we want to get to. And yeah, I think that's how we see ourselves too is, we're by no means working with these like pristine, absolutely remote indigenous people living in the middle of the rainforest with no contact. The groups that we work with, primarily the Quechua in eastern Ecuador, they're people who are really struggling to navigate that space between the globalized world, which has inextricably been linked to their reality and also their ancient traditions. So we really see Runa's work as a sort of new foundation for them to carry the parts of their culture and their traditions which they want to and they value, and also really enter the global world and share their products with international markets in a way that is respectful and empowering for them.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the early days, you won a couple business plan competitions. How much cash did you get out of that, plus services?
It was about $70K in cash and services.
Combined?
Combined, yeah. And yes, that gave us a little bit of run room. We moved to Ecuador then, shortly after, started doing a lot of background research and just trying to figure out how the heck to produce this stuff in Ecuador. Guayusa had never been commercially produced in any capacity, so it wasn't like we could just call up, Juan in Quito and say, hey, send me a container of Guayusa tea, we want to market it. The first year and a half, we really were on the ground day in, day out, just working from absolutely scratch to build the supply chain. We were thankful to make some good partnerships early on with some forestry engineers, some local agronomists who we started working with. We literally had to figure out drying temperatures, harvesting protocol, quality control. I mean, the list of just everything, every little thing is kind of taken for granted of what it takes to get some leaves from trees in the middle of the rainforest to a consumer product here in the U.S. And actually, when we arrived and we told farmers we wanted to buy Guayusa leaves, they literally laughed. They're like, oh, it's a funny joke,
Why?
There's no market for Guayusa. You sure you don't want to buy coffee or chocolate? Because for them, the idea of anyone wanting to buy something that was really just part of their ancient traditions was totally weird. Because all of Ecuadorian society in the world is saying, hey, your traditions don't mean anything. You should modernize. You should move to an oil field. You should, grow corn. You should do things like that. So for us to come and say, no, it's actually your, what you guys value, your traditions, these plants, this heritage that there's the opportunity for, and we can provide some pretty solid income. That was definitely a surprise, I guess, shall we say.
Okay, so you arrive in Ecuador. I mean, the amount of research that you guys did, to me, sounds really daunting. So I want to try to picture what it was like when you showed up in Ecuador. Did you know at that point what the hell to do? Like, oh, I've got this research methodology that I'm going to follow. I mean, what does it take to really ascertain, especially since you're in a new market, working with a product that has never before been exported? How does one go about doing that?
We made a ton of mistakes for sure. I won't go into the litany of that. But honestly, I think our strategy was very determined. So we had no problem just like banging our head against the wall and just working until we'd keel over every night. So I think honestly that's really the groundwork that we built Runa on, is just a lot of hard work and determination. Secondly, we really took building partnerships to heart. So I think we were as humble as possible, recognizing that we were two 23-year-olds in the jungle, and really look to advisors, mentors, experts, industry professionals, people who had done things even remotely similar, to pick their brains, ask questions, take notes, share them around, think about them, follow up. And we really did that for all of Runa. We still do. It's one of our main focuses as a team. And that was really helpful. I mean, I think that even in a few months we built a pretty good network of people in Ecuador. And for me, I think it's one of the biggest weaknesses of development programs and any organization or company operating in the developing world is just the tremendous lack of sharing. I mean, I still find it mind-boggling how there'll be, I'm sure you've seen it, the 7 organizations all building a well in like the exact same town with absolutely no coordination or no knowledge of each other. I think so for us to take a strong penchant towards building partnerships was pretty unique, and I think definitely paid off.
Did you do a lot of surveys? Because with market research, one tends to think, oh, market research involves a lot of surveying your, potential customers or suppliers. Did you run a lot of surveys with your stakeholders? Did that yield any valuable results for you?
Yeah, definitely. Running surveys, a lot of interviews. We're building that up now. We're actually using Salesforce to create a database of all the farmers. So right now it's about 1,200 farmers, and we're building this really cool, obviously cloud-based system to track the benefits over time that we're creating and the changes in their socioeconomic livelihoods. Again, so early on, we kind of started with bits and pieces of that.
So you did all your research, and at some point you decided, okay, we've done enough research. It's time to actually, hit the road and start something. So what did it take to create your supply chain? Were there some general stages that you guys went through before you knew without a doubt that you could provide quality Guayusa and export it to Western markets?
Yeah, good question. Honestly, we really did it bit by bit. And I think one of the things we took seriously early on was trying to set, little progressive milestones that we could accomplish. So saying, hey, we could just... So, for example, we got a grant from a government ministry, the Ministry of Export, pretty early on, just to do kind of initial research and development. So one of the things, we literally got this tiny little oven dryer. We could process 10 pounds at a time every 5 hours. Gave us a good sort of base to start drying leaves and testing temperatures and humidity and all that sort of stuff. And literally we put this thing in our regional director's garage. I mean, it was it was a pretty dinky operation. Those grinding meat processors, the ones that have the little
the little funnel at the top, and the
funnel,
meat comes out in it extrudes the meat out the other end in spaghetti ribbons.
So we bought one of those at some meat supply store to grind the leaves. I mean, you can get a good picture of what this was like. But it was basic, right? We knew that without starting with something and without getting a basic understanding of these core components, particle size, humidity, quality control, that sort of stuff, we couldn't go anywhere. And then from there, once we could have that, we could then promote that, hey, we had a functioning R&D facility, in the works, So I think in setting, in retrospect, quite little and potentially unimportant milestones, but really using that as a barometer to show progress, it helped us for our internal planning and also for raising money and bringing on new partners. So from there, I think it's always been back and forth. I mean, even still, we're close to outgrowing our current factory that's producing about 5,000 pounds a month and building one that'll produce 50,000 pounds a month early next year. So it's always that process. I would say it's never great, we've done our research and now it's implementing. Then honestly, I think a lot of entrepreneurs can get caught up in that. You want to kind of wait till you have the perfect plan and then execute. For something that really involves a high level of innovation, it's just not possible. You always have to get as much information as possible and then really ride it out on some faith and some guesstimates, and then sort of fill in that white space and create new white space in the process.
So in order to get your product right, do you actually rely on scientists to study the quality of your leaves and, help you deal with pest issues or fungus issues? I mean, how technical and scientific does producing your product get?
It's getting more scientific. Again, early on, for our blends, we literally bought some herbs and blended them in Dan's kitchen to figure out the first blends. So, it's kind of gone from simple to more robust. At this point, we use, labs in Quito and across the U.S. and Europe to do both QC testing and investigation about the different components that Guayusa has. We've kind of discovered it has a ton of polyphenols, basically antioxidants, and we're doing some research to piece out which ones those are and discovering some pretty cool stuff in the process. And I would say it's a big bulk of it. And then there's this sort of logistical bucket of all the export regulations, import regulations, brokers, warehousing, FDA, all that which we deal with.
So what does the supply or producer side look like? You work with the Quechua farmers, so how do you have those guys organized?
Yeah, so part of our model as a social enterprise is that we don't actually grow any of the Guayusa tea plants. Basically what we do is we train farmers to harvest from the trees that they have in their own forest gardens and also to reforest degraded lands with Guayusa trees and other crops to sort of rebuild these forest gardens on their lands. So we have a team of field staff that's trained to provide technical assistance to farmers, and then we have another harvesting and production team which then works with the farmers every day and buys the fresh leaves. So every day we're buying from 10 to 15 different farms, and they harvest 50-pound sacks of fresh leaves. We pay them on the spot, bring the leaves to our facility, where it goes through withering, drying, milling, sifting, and packing until we're exporting, big pallets full of basically loose leaf tea. That comes into the U.S. We then send that to our co-packing facilities. So we have a third party that makes all the tea boxes. And then we have another third party we're working with now to produce our bottled drinks.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Do you find it really challenging to work with the indigenous community? Because I would imagine that, their level of financial literacy is not that high. So, and there also might be a lot of cultural differences too that might make working with a Western company challenging. Have you found certain challenges that you guys were able to overcome in terms of working with indigenous communities and what their expectations were and how they tend to do business or, maybe not do business?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, the indigenous mindset, it's very different. And even locally, you compare the sort of mestizo farmers, the ones that are indigenous, with the indigenous farmers. And, the indigenous farmers say this, that they don't have the same sort of tools and resources and even just ways of thinking about farming. Where the mestizos, they think about it like a business. They calculate inputs, they calculate outputs, as sort of we might assume farmers do. But the traditional style of farming for them, it's basically selective. Well, basically what they do is traditionally they'll burn down like a small chunk of rainforest and let it grow back. And in letting it grow back, they'll sort of cut down the species that they don't want and just let the species grow that they do want. So there's no planting, there's no real management. It's sort of this stewarding and sort of carving out of nature's own reproductive process. So you can kind of see how that's a different mindset. And even too, these farmers who very recently are part of a cash economy, don't have bank accounts, many of them don't have IDs, most of them sign receipts with a thumbprint. So in terms of doing business, also these are communities who have been incredibly discriminated against and ripped off endlessly by foreigners. So from our end, I think we recognized it would take a lot of transparency and just a lot of time just to really prove people that we're doing things right. We were really here to build partnerships. We weren't seeing this as a short-term project. We weren't seeing this as a, way to get rich, or we're going to pull any tricks on them. So we've just been really diligent to build in, receipt systems, different weighing systems to make sure weighing is transparent, and just being there, really taking it seriously that if we say we're going to be somewhere, we do our absolute best. It is Ecuador, so we can't be perfect, but taking that seriously.
Yeah, I know, because in Latin America, everyone shows up pretty late. No one's ever on time. Do you find that really challenging?
It's different. Yeah, it's also, I guess in that level, it's one of the things that I always make a point of with our management there is locally, most things like Runa are their projects. So like the government or an NGO or someone will come and do like a coffee planting project that's like a 6-month project and then ends. So in many ways, in some of the local farmers, they call us the Proyecto de Guayusa, like the Guayusa project. And we try and make a serious point to say, like, we are not a project. There's no end date. There's no end site. There's no limitation of what we're trying to do. We are a business, and we're here to build a long-term partnership. We see ourselves doing this for generations to come, and we're not working for any sort of short-term profits, or there's no deadline saying, great, by 2012 or 2013, things are done, and good luck. And this is really a long-term thing for us. And I think it's taken some time to really change that mindset just because it's such an ingrained part of the community's history with NGOs, government projects. So it is interesting in that way too, how we have to break some of those expectations and sort of carve out our own role and identity.
Cool. So you got your supply chain ready, and now it's all about tackling the Western market. What did it take for you to get your product right, first of all? I mean, did your product go through several iterations? I mean, I was just talking to the mushroom guys, Back to the Roots, and their first product was in a bag. And their first partner looked at their product that was in a bag, and they were like, the guy was like, that is disgusting. You guys need to go back to R&D and like come up with nice packaging. So did you guys go through that process too, where your product went through several iterations of packaging before you were able to get it to a point where it'd be well received in stores?
Yeah, the Back to the Roots guys are awesome, and they're some of the best entrepreneurs that I know, and also have a lot of great stories. On our end, so we launched our first product was a tea box with pyramid tea bags, We had this idea that we really had to be super premium and really make it the nicest packaging ever. It was very expensive, for one. Our starting price on the shelf was like $9.99. It was also very big. Logistically, we had to put these big overwraps, the envelope the tea bag comes in, over the pyramid tea bags. So it was kind of where we put ourselves, and we realized, hey, we're taking up a lot of shelf space. Retailers don't like that, and the price point is quite high. So, in retrospect, that was probably, well, it was definitely an error. And then we redid our packaging. It's a much smaller box. We're using natural paper tea bags, and in stores now, it's anywhere from $4.79 to like $6.19 at the top. And by the end of the year, we'll probably have everything, high about $4.99, which is a really competitive price for an organic and fair trade tea. Yeah, so it took us some time to work out those kinks. Being in the market, we do a ton of product demos. So we're always in the stores, talking to consumers, working with the grocery teams, and that gives us an ability to have, our eye on the ground and really see what people respond to.
So in the very beginning, was it you and your partner just calling up a bunch of different gourmet grocery stores and trying to pitch them on carrying your tea, or did you have another process?
Yeah, good question. We brought on a team of brokers, so a third-party agency that's been really helpful getting new accounts for us. They've been really fantastic. They have the retail relationships. We also brought on a VP of sales who has pretty tremendous experience in the industry, and he's helped land a lot of our major accounts. And then we also supplement that with our own internal team going store to store and pitching the product.
So you brought in professionals from the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. Cool. So what I have been really impressed by in seeing your company grow over the past few years is the amount of money that you've actually raised and the different sources of investment you've received. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, how can another small social enterprise replicate your success and, raise the VC funding and tap into alternative sources of funding in order to grow their business?
Yeah, so we've been really thankful to receive a pretty diverse stream of funding to help us grow the organization. We raised a round from angel investors through a convertible debt structure. We closed out a little while ago. Had a few dozen angels from pretty much every industry you can imagine who invested to support the company. Kind of started more with friends and family and then moved into professional angels the last few months of it. And then we also received about $500,000 in grants from USAID, from the U.S. government, the Indian Development Bank, the German government, a couple other NGOs who were very impressed by our model, the way that we have a pretty distinct model to support the indigenous people and also our growth. We're now working with about 1,200 farmers, and we're part of this USAID program in Ecuador, and among the 20 organizations that got funded, we had like twice as many families benefited from our project as opposed to any other organization in the mix. So that's been really helpful, and we've been super thankful for their support. And then we recently received a $500,000 investment from the Ecuadorian government. So actually the government in Ecuador took a minority stake in our subsidiary in Ecuador. And that's really fantastic, obviously having them on board and so bought into what we're doing to create economic development is huge. The other resources and ideas they bring to the table have been really valuable. And a cool part of that is it's basically a social impact investing fund. And within 5 years, their plan is to sell their shares to the farmers that we support and our employees. Part of this very Ecuadorian vision to make businesses more democratic and more democratically owned, which is parallel to our mission and intention. So that's a pretty cool setup. And then we're just as of next week opening our first equity round. We're raising a few million from angel investors. So that's one of the big things I'm working on right now.
So these grants that you receive from these government organizations and NGOs, they're pretty much just straight up cash grants. You don't have to pay them back. What does it take to actually qualify for a USAID grant?
I think from our first call with them to finally getting money was about 14 months.
Ooh.
And tons of due diligence, tons of site inspections, reviews, kind of the full deal. They're very thorough and very serious and very professional.
And how much did you get from those guys again?
That was about $250,000.
That's not bad. 14 months, $250,000. That could be worthwhile.
Yeah, we'll take it. Yeah, we're definitely not complaining.
Yeah, so, how would a social entrepreneur working in a developing country be able to tap into such a vast wealth of funding sources? How did it happen for you? Was it all through networking and referrals, or did you do research and hire a professional to help you find these sources and actually get the funding?
You mean for the for-profit side?
Well, yeah, for through the NGOs and the government organizations. Like, how were you able to discover so many different sources and actually get the funds? Was it just through referrals and networking that you discovered the German organization, for example, that funded you guys? Or did you actually sit down and hire a consultant and say, hey, we want to find all the different sources of funding that we can get for our company in grant funding. Can you help us identify some targets and negotiate those agreements?
Yeah, I think it goes back to our point, too, of we were just very determined to meet people when we got to Ecuador, and still are, so we just built a network and talked to everyone we could. So through that process, we always get suggestions of talk to this person, talk to that person, hey, there's this new fund that's sprouted up through GIZ, and work things that way. Yeah, and then just a lot of follow-up, a lot of follow-through, a lot of pushing pieces forward.
Yeah, so how is it possible as a for-profit company to receive grant money?
Well, it's a mix. I mean, so we're a hybrid. We also have the foundation, which more directly supports the farmers. It does a lot more environmental programs. As a for-profit, though, the thinking behind it, if you're USAID, is your mission is to support the poorest people in developing countries, in short. Historically, the way AID has done that is through grants to nonprofits and short-term projects, kind of back to that whole project mentality. So there's all these stories in the developing world of a USAID-funded project where they built these they built these water systems, these filtration devices. You go back a year later and they're being used as toilets. Just very narrow-minded, very limited in their approach to creating impact, kind of myopic and ineffective, therefore. So basically what they take a step back. They're like, hey, who really is creating benefits for the most disadvantaged? Who really is making an impact in these regions? And if you look, it's largely businesses. They're the chocolate companies, the coffee companies that are providing jobs and income for these farmers and for people in these remote areas. And that's kind of back to the previous points. It's sustainable. Businesses aren't designed to go away after a certain period of time. And from an aid perspective, they can provide sort of strategic interventions to say, hey, you make plantain chips. What if we help fund a project to help you export? And therefore, if you can export, you can increase your production. If you increase your production, you increase your farmer base and therefore create more impact. So they can say, maybe we can leverage some resources to provide sort of these focused interventions and support networks for these companies, and therefore allow them to create the impact which they're really designed to do, and we as an aid agency are not. I guess in short, in the economic development lens. And I think taking pretty smart strategies, and it's still a nascent trend, but I see only getting deeper because the results are pretty clear across the board.
So USAID is actually supporting Runa, the for-profit, directly? Or is it still all going through your foundation?
Actually, most of the grant money has gone through our Ecuadorian company, the for-profit.
Okay, so most of the grant money is going to the for-profit. And in terms of the foundation, then, when you receive grant money for the foundation, what kinds of projects do they typically go to in order to support the operations of your for-profit? So I'm really intrigued by this whole concept of the hybrid company and how an organization can make that model work.
Yeah, I think it really depends. I mean, honestly, in our perspective, it depends on the project that we're executing. If we're doing something which is related to the farmer development, it's really about strengthening the farmers almost to combat with us. That's clearly something for the foundation, where the foundation wants to make them stronger as producers and give them more power as opposed to us as a company. And there's foundations that really focus on that, and nonprofits in a very nonprofit lens. For-profit side, then there's the development funders who are more interested in economic development. We've gotten some funds from the Andean Development Bank where that's what they do. They support economic development. So I think it's just sort of classic scenario of finding the meeting ground of shared interest, looking at what priorities funders have and aligning yourself with those.
Do you recommend that social entrepreneurs create a hybrid structure in order to be able to attract grant money from foundations and government organizations?
No. I think that's actually an idea that's floating in the social enterprise space, which I pretty strongly disagree with, in the sense that I think you should create a hybrid model if that is clearly the most effective way to accomplish your mission. I think if you have a business that like truly the most effective way to both create a sustainable enterprise and create the impact that you want is through a hybrid structure, that's definitely what you should do. And I think there's a handful of businesses. One of my favorite is a new organization in Kenya called Sanergy, who is a really amazing hybrid structure to solve sanitation issues in the slums of Nairobi. I think that's a great example of they're truly leveraging the benefits of a hybrid structure to create their impact. I think the route of the again, it's sort of back to the classic NGO issues is when you start making yourself sort of a pimp for money, and you're like, oh, we're an NGO, and oh, there's money for this water project. Yeah, we do education, but oh, we could totally do a water project. We're gonna apply some money for that. It just, you really get mission drift. You're not leveraging your core capacity. You're not really accomplishing your true mission of why you exist. So yeah, I think there's definitely opportunities, and I think the funders are smart too. I mean, it's quite difficult to fool them, especially the bigger ones, if you just kind of seem like you have some sort of offshoot. And also, too, I honestly don't consider an organization a social enterprise if they really run a business and have some sort of, corporate social responsibility initiative or something sort of secondary or an offshoot to their core business. I mean, that's great. That's amazing. More companies should do that. And that's what I would put in the, CSR bucket, which is great. I think everyone should do that, no question. But the real social enterprises, I think, have impact built into their model, whether that's a nonprofit, whether that's a for-profit, whether that's a hybrid. Impact is created in them doing what they do, but not doing, something else in addition to what they really do at the core.
Absolutely. That's a very good distinction right there. So can you help us demystify the whole process of raising angel and VC funding? What did it take for you guys to, ready yourself to become attractive to angel investors? And then that whole structure, you had the debt swap round and then the equity round. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what the differences are and, how to become attractive to investors at those different levels?
Yeah, I think in part it goes back to my previous point about just hitting milestones and achieving them. Even when our milestones weren't major, we had them. And if someone said, we met someone in March and said, hey, we're going to do this in April and May, and we did exactly that or did more than that, and came back in May and said, hey, we're raising some money now, they could say, great, actually, it said they were going to do something, they did it, they have another plan, they're going to do that too, and I have some faith in what they're doing, just to try and take out some of the speculative element. Yeah, I think also, honestly, one of the things I don't think we did terribly well, I think we did okay, was really piloting things. I think to some extent we did. In other instances, we really just did a lot really fast and we took pretty big bites. And I really respect entrepreneurs that really pilot what they're doing. That they.
What do you mean pile? The pile is
pilot.
Pilot.
Yeah. So hey, I want to be a big cow farm, and I have this great business plan to have 10,000 cows on this farm, and it's going to be amazing. It's like, well, could you basically take the business model, shrink it down for one cow, and basically prove that it works with one cow and prove that it's profitable and sustainable and efficient, and the market's there and all that sort of stuff, and then scale it to 10,000 cows, as opposed to buying 500 cows and realizing that they all get sick and the market's terrible and all that sort of stuff. And I really think that entrepreneurs who can bootstrap a little bit, the back to the roots guys are definitely the pros at bootstrapping and growing organically. I think that ultimately leads to a much more sustainable business model. Or you just prove to yourself that, it didn't work and you didn't waste anybody's money or not that much time.
Cool. So let's say we have this, a example, social enterprise. They're growing, they're meeting their milestones. They've been operating based on, from funds generated from a social enterprise business plan competition. And now, their funds might be starting to run out and they're looking to find investors. So what do you have to do from the moment you decide that you're ready to actively seek angel and VC funding?
Yeah, the structure that we created is called convertible debt. Legally and logistically, it's pretty easy to get set up. Highly recommended to entrepreneurs in early stages. It basically helps you avoid having to set a valuation for your company. When you're growing and just really putting basic pieces together, it's substantially difficult / impossible to really value your company. Most people would say it's near impossible to value it at any point reasonably, but definitely in the early stages. The basic way it works is you give people a discount to a future round. So they get basically a bonus on whatever the share price is at a future round, and an accrued interest at the same time. So I really recommend that structure. It worked quite well for us. And then just having good materials. I think we started out having pretty poor investment materials, a slide deck, pro formas, things like that. And at this point, we have really polished, really well-reviewed, really professional materials. And it just makes the world of difference. Because people look at you as a real company instead of, hey, Dan and Tyler put this together on PowerPoint at 2 a.m. and sent this to me an hour later. So I think, investing a little bit of time and money and having some professional materials makes a big difference. And then having, your financials and spreadsheets and all that to back it up when people really dive in.
Yeah, definitely. Once I actually received a business plan for review that was printed out in fuchsia ink.
Oh, really?
And I highly recommended to my friend to not invest in that company, and unfortunately she did, and lo and behold, a few years later the company went out of business. But it was the fuchsia ink that was the dead giveaway.
Yeah, that seems like maybe questionable.
Yeah. So, did you actually hire a consultant to help you, set up the convertible round structure? Like, do you need to get a lawyer involved? And then who produced all the really fancy investment materials? Did you also hire out a creative person to help you out with that too?
Yeah, we hired a creative firm that did a great job with the designs. We have our legal firm in Providence who's amazing, outside GC, really fantastic, really affordable as well. Yeah, so we just kind of general business, find good people, make sure they're good at what they do and put them to work.
So there are legal firms whose specific business is to help small growing companies like yours attract venture capital funding.
No. There are firms that do that. I haven't met any good ones really. Our lawyers they do the legal back end. So we say, hey, we need a document, they produce it, but they don't help us fundraise. Yeah, that's the entrepreneur's job. I've never seen a case when any entrepreneur or any company's been able to raise money where the vast majority of the weight hasn't been on the entrepreneurs themselves. They're the ones who people are believing in. In many cases, they're most of what they're believing in, let alone the business itself. Yeah, I think there are people who are fundraising consultants or brokers, and that maybe kind of works sometimes. But at most, all they're doing is getting you leads, getting you meetings, and then you're pitching, closing, everything else. So yeah, I just think it really takes an entrepreneur to really believe in what they're doing and not be shy.
Okay, so you have your professionally produced, beautiful investment documents that you're going to present to potential investors. You have all your financial documents and everything in order, if they want to really look underneath the surface. You have your lawyer that is creating, contracts that, can be executed in the appropriate way. Now, where do you go to find these investors?
I guess back to what we did in Ecuador, just talk to everyone you possibly can. Really leverage your network, ask people for help. I think it just takes a lot of humility to say, hey, you know what? I'm looking for help. Maybe you're interested, maybe you're not, maybe you know people, maybe you have tips, maybe you have advice. There's always the, cachet if you go to someone when you're really asking for money, you ask for advice, sort of thing, which seems to be a pretty common and well-respected practice. I know we've used it pretty endlessly. And yeah, I think just being authentic, really wanting to learn from people, wanting to make connections, being generous, being open. And then once you get people in, have them get more people in and have those people get more people in. Sort of classic runaround.
So you didn't actually go to I think there's certain organizations that really put you in front of a lot of VCs who are actively looking for startups to invest in. Like organizations, I believe, like the Investor Circle in the Bay Area is one.
Yeah. We actually just received investment from Investor Circle, or the angels through Investor Circle, who is a really incredible group. I recommend them highly. At the same time, we'd applied to Investor Circle 3 or 4 times and got denied, and then just closed an investment with their Philadelphia group. So I think that's tricky. It really depends on 2 things in my experience. One is the size of your company, and 2, the industry you're in. So for us, we're in the consumer packaged goods industry, which honestly has a very different set of investment criteria and expectations compared to the tech world. I would say 95+% of the investors I've ever met only invest in tech or largely invest in tech for obvious reasons. Yeah, so I think 2 issues with that. One is that in the CPG world, the expectations of what constitutes a quote early stage company is much higher. So in our world, basically 1 to 5 million in revenue is called a quote early stage company for consumer packaged goods. In our world, 5 million in sales, we're doing pretty well, and we're on track, but won't be there for a little while. So when we were basically doing, maybe 100,000 in sales and looking for money, those people are like, yeah, great, give me a call when you're at 5 million in sales. We're like, thanks, that's great, but you're not really helping me right now. But in the tech world, people raise insane amounts of money with literally an idea and maybe a business plan. It happens less nowadays from what I've seen in my very limited experience, but definitely happens. So if you're in the tech space or the healthcare space or the energy space, you can raise tons of money with just an idea, just a concept.
So how business plans have, different sections or, components entrepreneurs need to address, like your financial projections, your executive statement or mission, your marketing plan. In terms of creating an investor's packet, what are the different components that a startup needs to actually create in order to attract VC investment? And are there any particular areas that you would recommend the entrepreneur really focus on? Like, in your experience of running your investment packet to various different investors, and I'm sure some of them are very savvy and looking through all your documents with a fine-tooth comb, what would you advise entrepreneurs seeking investors to really focus on and make sure that section is really tight?
Honestly, in our experience, it has to be everything.
So what are the different components?
And honestly, too, if anyone listening wants to see a copy of our slide deck, I'd be happy to send it around as an example. I'm absolutely sure it's not the best, but I think it's pretty decent. So I'll give my email address and stuff at the end, so feel free to reach out. Yeah, we have, executive summary slide, basically the copy of, kind of summary of how much money we're raising, who we are, what we've done. Summary of the industry trends, the white space, our core technology, which is RT. For us, then it goes into summary of the supply chain, what we built in Ecuador. Then all of our sales, the 1,700 stores and whatnot that we're in. New product launch, growth of stores, competitive set, management and advisory board, funding and revenue projections, sources of use of fund, end of the deck. This is our long deck, so we have a shorter deck, which is like 8 slides, which takes out some of that. But I think the key slides are definitely your team. Most investors will say they'll invest in an A team with a C business plan, but they never invest in a C team with an A+ business plan. So really making sure that your management team and your advisors can shine. That's most, I know a lot of people who they'll open a deck and they'll just go straight to the team and they won't even look at anything else. I think that's big. Just clearly communicating what you do. I'm still surprised, and I think we did this not great in the beginning, but entrepreneurs that can't really just communicate clearly and in just simple language what they do. If there's some innovative technology, there's this, there's that. Oftentimes, even among charts and graphs and all that, you just can't really figure out exactly what the business does and exactly how it makes money. So just making sure that it's exceptionally clear what your business does, how you make money, and what's your plan. It sounds very simple, but actually when you get into it, it's very easy to dilute those 3 points. And we're very serious. One of our advisors is quite strict around not having any text that's less than, I think it's 36-point font, and just like making sure you have like one major point per slide. Like when you start getting into multiple points on a slide and complicated graphs and charts and small text and paragraphs, it's like, that's not what a slide deck is. That's not what a presentation is. You want to just create bold information, really high level, clear points, move to the next point. So at the very least, that's what's worked for us.
Cool. So it's very much like you're actually in a business plan competition, pitching the panel.
Yeah, I guess maybe to clarify that, we actually have 2 different decks. We have one which we send by email, which has more text in it, and then we have one which we give for presentations. The one when we do presentations has almost no text, just because when we pitch, we want people paying attention to us and not a screen. It's really our personalities and what we're communicating to get people inspired. So we basically take out all the text, and that's what we say. But obviously, if you're emailing someone, there's no, audio recording that goes along with it.
Got it. Cool. So where then, if the attention or if the management team is actually a hugely important part of whether or not your company would be considered an attractive investment, where do you recommend startup founders go to find really good team members?
I think it depends on your industry. For us, it's, I guess back to the same point that we just really use our networks. Whenever we're looking for a new position, first thing we do is blast out the post to everyone in our network that, we knows people in the space. I think that's number one. And then if you're hiring people, there's always the job boards in your industry and whatnot.
Yeah, I've heard there are actually these online dating sites for people seeking co-founders and, board members or partners. Have you ever tried anything like that?
Never. I'm not familiar with those myself, so I couldn't speak to them.
Okay. So in your long and exciting journey of entrepreneurship, have there been any moments that were particularly life-changing for you? A story of or experience of inspiration or failure or success or amazing mentorship that you'd like to share with our audience?
That's a really fantastic question. First, our entrepreneurial journey hasn't been that long. We're only 26. A specific moment.
Like what actually, was there any experience that you had that solidified in your mind or, gave you the sense that beyond a doubt you are a social entrepreneur, this is your path, this is your purpose, and this is what you'll do for the rest of your life?
I would say, it definitely is constant. I don't think there was ever any one moment and that's just like endless. I do think though for me, on like right when we were deciding to start Runa and kind of deliberating back and forth of, should we do other things or should we start the organization? I really remember, we had tons of conversations with people and it was intellectual on many levels, but I really remember just kind of sinking down to my heart and checking in and really just feeling this like depth, like a really strong depth and power and some sort of faith that there was some reason to do this and it's what I was supposed to be doing. That wavers occasionally, but when I need it, I can always check back into that and it stayed strong. And I think that's consistent with anybody that does something that they love and really believe in. You can feel it. There's something strong, something rooted, something inside which can't really be taken away. And yeah, I can pretty vividly remember the first time of checking into that feeling and feeling it so strong and being surprised, but just knowing there's nothing else I could do and I couldn't not listen to whatever that voice was inside.
Yeah, I think it's always really healthy to really take a step back from what you're doing and check in with yourself and ask yourself, is what I'm doing really feel like an authentic expression of who I am? And do I feel good about what I'm doing at every given moment? And if there isn't that unshakable doubt, then I think it's a really good moment to question and to reconsider the path that you're on.
Definitely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
So have there been any mistakes that you've made in your entrepreneurial journey that you would advise other aspiring social entrepreneurs to do differently?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've made a lot of mistakes. I think the piloting point is something that I definitely believe in. I wish we would have piloted things some more. We could have saved ourselves some time and some money if we would have. I think that's a big one. The other one, be really diligent about hiring contractors. As a young company, you need a lot of external support. Most likely you're not going to hire a lot of staff, but you're going to find, a contracted accountant, contracted lawyer, contracted web designers, contracted consultants. There's tons of it. It's kind of endless, actually. And we've made a handful of mistakes around hiring consultants and contractors. Namely, not negotiating contracts thoroughly. For our first website, we honestly just were kind of naive and not very thorough and didn't really negotiate the contract well or review it. We were just really needed to get the project going and kind of blew it off and just signed the document. That ended up getting us in some trouble. That if we would have taken the time, reviewed it, and really made a careful decision, we could have avoided. We've done that a few times. Thankfully, been able to work our way out of. And also due diligence. I've become a really big believer in getting references from people. Never hire any employee or contractor you haven't talked to some client they've worked with, preferably multiple clients they've worked with. Also, a really good tip that one of our mentors gave us was always to do backdoor reference checks. So I can never tell how widely used this is. Maybe not new news, but oftentimes people say, great, yeah, I'm a consultant, I worked with these two companies, you should call them. Of course they're going to give you the names of people who they worked well with. Why would they give you a bad reference? So to do one of two things. One is either call that person and say, hey, Bill, Ted said he's worked with you, did this project. Is there anyone else on the team who also worked with Bill, worked with Ted, who's not in your department or who had a different role that maybe I could talk to? Because maybe Bill and Ted are friends, but Carol, who also worked on the project, is going to tell you that Ted's a total dick and an asshole and he did a terrible job. But Ted and Bill are best friends, and obviously Bill wouldn't tell you that. Or you can say, hey, great, yeah, I see on Ted's consulting CV that he also worked with Meyer Enterprises. So, he didn't list them as a reference, but it's not that hard to call the main line at Meyer and say, hey, I'm Tyler from Runa, thinking about hiring this guy, just wondering if anyone there could talk to me about what your experience was. And they might be like, oh yeah, that guy was amazing, he was incredible, or that guy was a total crook, don't hire him, please. And I think that's a really smart way to do it, just because you really cover your butt.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all your awesome advice and helping us understand the behind-the-scenes story of Runa's success and rapid growth. I'm really appreciative of your willingness to be so honest with our audience, and I think your story will certainly help and inspire many of the entrepreneurs in our audience.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I'm been so thankful for all the mentors and other entrepreneurs that have taken time to help us grow, and we're still making our mistakes and have a long way to go. But it's really always fun to be part of the entrepreneurial community, and always amazing to get to share the few lessons that we're learning.
So as we close this segment, is there anything you'd like to share with the audience in terms of your most recent product lines or projects that you might be working on that you'd like the audience to know about?
Yeah, our goal from the beginning was to be a bottled beverage company. We really saw the big growth opportunity to be a bottled tea. And on Monday, we're producing our first batch of bottled teas. We'll be hitting shelves in Whole Foods, probably 30 to 40 Whole Foods, New York to Boston. They've accepted a line next month. So that's really exciting and really fulfilling for us to see that original vision coming to fruition. And our tea boxes as well are hitting shelves in a lot of bigger stores like Stop and Shop and Giant, Fresh Market. We're in about 1,700 stores now. Also our website, we're launching a new website soon, but if anyone wants to get some Runa tea through the website, I can offer the discount code Runa Nation, RUNANATION. We'll give you a 10% off an online order if anyone feels so inclined to try the product. Definitely welcome that. And we do a lot of cool stuff through Facebook, a lot of giveaways, all that sort of stuff if anyone wants to follow us through social media.
And how is social media marketing working for you guys?
I would say it's good. We primarily are focused on trial for the product. Being a consumer product, we want people to try it, which you can't really do through digital means for the most part. But we did a cool thing actually, not last weekend, but the weekend before, where we had 60 people who were part of this Spanish language group, people trying to learn Spanish in New York, come to our office, and we did a tea tasting and a live Skype chat with the farmers in Ecuador. So they could ask questions, practice their Spanish, and really create that engagement from the producers and the consumers. So we sort of use, I guess, digital technology, if anything, to build those bridges.
So people can also connect with you on Facebook and Twitter?
Facebook, it's facebook.com/drinkruna, and Twitter, we're at Runa Nation, same discount code.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lorna. Big hugs to you from New York, and hope to cross paths soon.
Awesome. Me too. Let me know next time you're in San Francisco.
I will.
Martin Zwilling, startup mentor and angel investor, talks about the different levels of connection that successful entrepreneurs master in his Forbes article, Great Entrepreneurs Build Deep People Connections. I've included a link to his article in our show notes, entrepreneursforchange.com/7. Level 1 involves talking at a social level, which many people never get beyond in their professional relationships. You must attain a level of skill and ease at this level, and quickly move past this level to more empowering levels of connection. Level 2 involves connecting through personal power, which includes everything from your professional position, your existing relationships, expertise, and passion for your cause or business. Learn how to use these aspects of your personal power effectively. Level 3 involves shaping the intent of the connection. Use action verbs that unleash forward-moving velocity towards your goals. Don't waste your precious time or theirs on long, boring conversations at lower levels. Level 4 involves connecting at the level of energy and passion, which creates connections that resonate at a deeper level. These are the most powerful connections that you can cultivate. Now, navigating these connection levels is essential with face-to-face connections, but I'd like to invite you to explore the idea that you can replicate these levels through virtual connections using the power of technology. You can connect with your audience and build powerful relationships through your blog, email list, podcast, and webinars in meaningful ways. I want to share with you a tool that can help you harness the power of the masses around specific causes to create informative, interactive maps. One of my favorite crowdsourcing social innovators is an organization called Ushahidi, a nonprofit software company that develops free and open source software for information collection, visualization, and interactive mapping. Using their software, activists, news organizations, and everyday citizens can mobilize their constituents to send in data that can be added to an interactive map via SMS, Skype, and Twitter. The platform was created in the aftermath of the 2007 Kenyan elections as a means to collect eyewitness reports of areas affected by post-election violence. Since then, their technology has been used to provide real-time crisis mapping of disaster situations, such as areas that were in urgent need of aid in the aftermath of the 2010 Haiti earthquake, a project that was led by Patrick Meyer of iRevolution. Survivors Connect uses Ushahidi to power their global map of resources for documenting and preventing human trafficking. Their Freedom Geomap includes a password-protected section with locations of safe havens for trafficking victims. If you do a lot of grassroots organizing, check out Ushahidi's mapping software. It's hard to deny that we are experiencing a revolution in mobile technology, and that more people have access to cell phones than the internet. More and more people are using their mobile phones, smartphones, and tablets to shop online, research products, and seek information. Therefore, it's important for you as a business owner to ensure that your website can be properly rendered for these myriad devices, or you're missing out on a lot of traffic. Here's a handy free tool to check your website's responsiveness. It's called the Responsinator. It will show you how your website appears in a number of devices like iPhones, Androids, and the iPad. I've included the link to the tool in our show notes. Check it out. Thanks, folks, for listening to the Entrepreneurs for a Change podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please help us reach more people with inspiring stories like this one by giving us a 5-star rating in iTunes. If this podcast inspires you to join the movement of change-making entrepreneurs, we'd love to give you a jumpstart with our free Business Changemakers Toolkit, which you can download at www.entrepreneursforachange.com/join. If you have a changemaker in mind you'd love for us to interview, go to entrepreneursforachange.com/suggest and tell us who and why. Finally, feel free to stop by facebook.com/entrepreneursforachange to share your thoughts and say hello.